and welcome to another episode of Convention Confessional. I am your host, Katy Hunt, flying solo today because I felt like I needed to talk about some personal experiences of my own. One of those being my time as a judge at conventions. Um, I have probably been judging, well, since I was born, but at conventions, I'd say probably about at least 10 years, at several different conventions throughout the New England area, mostly at Kineticon and Anime Boston, to be specific. And yeah, it's really fun. Like it's kind of an honor to be asked to be judged, actually. Because you go in and you sign up and you go through all the bells and whistles to actually be judged at these conventions, but for someone to come to you and be like, "Hey, you want to judge these costumes? You want to judge these performances?" It's kind of an honor. Like it makes you feel special, like you've done something right in your life, which is, always, nice and uplifting. Um, but yeah, I started judging probably in about 2010, I think, was probably the first time someone asked me to judge. No, that's not true. I judged up at AAC in New Hampshire for a couple of years on their masquerade staff, um, doing. Sorry, you might hear a cat in the background. My sister's cat is very excited that I'm home. Judging you, by the way, because, that fits the theme of this episode. Sorry. Up in New Hampshire, a couple of times I did costume judging because I hosted their masquerade for so long. But I got an award as the MC to give out kind of like a judge's award. So I did some costume judging up there for a while, but most of my costume judging happened at Kineticon starting in about 2010. And costume judging and performance judging are two completely different beasts. Because as a costume judge, you are nitpicking at like the smallest details and, different costume design and, like all those details that make the costume. And I feel like the costume judges have a little bit harder than the performance judges do, only because a lot of the time you've got some really solid performances. Anybody can make a comedy skit, anybody can make a dance skit. Um, and a lot of the time it comes down to, well, who had the better costume? So you have to go back to those notes there to see who gets best in show in a lot of cases, which we will get to in one of my stories today, because it actually came down to costumes for a certain reason. But I used to love costume judging. I still do love costume judging. I just don't have, the conventions that I go to that ask me to be a part of that, which is fine. But it was so much fun because you see all these different people coming with all their different creative talents. Because, sure, somebody might not be the strongest sewer, but their prop is unreal, and vice versa. Like, you might have the best prop in the world, but hi, what's a French seam? I don't know. I've been sewing for years, and it's like a French seam, huh? It looks very nice. I know that. Which I know now people who do costume judging are probably like, you don't know what a French seam is. No, I don't, and I admit it openly. I'm not as nitpicky when it comes to the judging. We have different levels of people on costume judging for reasons like that. Like certain people that are good at props and people that are good with the sewing aspect and people are good with the design aspect. Like you have to have all those different minds melded in at different levels. So you get different opinions. So it's kind of like a fair judging. It's not just these elite people judging your costume. And I feel like that makes people feel better too. Like, you have a couple of good names in there, people that have been in this business for years and years and years. And then you got some people that's like, okay, you might be up and coming, but you've won a couple of awards. Good for you. Like, I think that right there is some pretty good merit. You go into a judging room and you see somebody that won, a costume judging the last couple of conventions they went to, I'll be like, yeah, you know what? I trust their opinion 100%. And I feel like my merit to judge came from, I competed a couple of times, got a couple of awards. One of them being Best at Show in Anime Boston with my friends in Dead Moon Circus. We did a whole skit with the 4 girls from Dead Moon Circus. Duh. And we won Best in Show, and our costumes were amazing. I barely any costume to them because if they wear a lot of jumpsuit and bras, and like their wigs were insane. But that dance skit was hard. It took a lot to learn it, and we got best in show for it. We really like fought, to get that skit to be what it was. And from that point on, because of my reputation like working conventions and being in theater for as long as I've been in theater, that granted me, people's, I guess, like they thought higher of me, and therefore like thought that I was good enough to be a judge. And I feel like I was a fair judge. You want to make sure everybody feels included, not just like the really, really advanced people. Like there's a lot of novice people coming into these conventions, and you want them to continue doing, cosplay. You want them to continue to compete. You want to, boost their spirits. So, I mean, yeah, judging for craftsmanship, definitely the hardest of the two. Performance judging is you sit there and you watch people like dance skits and comedy skits and singing. Some people sing live at these things. Like I don't even really like singing live because my confidence is like pretty good, but I don't like singing live if I don't have to. And some of these kids, they show up and they've written a whole damn song. You're like, oh, okay, look at you, wow. So I feel like the performers should just have it a little bit easier because you're just kind of sitting there and watching the show, and then those all come together, all those numbers come together, and that's basically how we decide your best in show. That being said, my first story of the day we're getting into came from Anime Boston 2010. It was the year after we won with our Dead Moon Circus skit, and I was asked to judge for the first time for performance. Again, huge honor. The problem is that a lot of the time, your friends groups are still competing in a lot of these conventions. Now, it's kind of like an unsaid rule of judging. You don't judge your friends. And they know that. Like they know that you're not going to judge them. Like somebody, you kind of just put like on your little paper that they give you like pass. And it's not saying that you don't want to give them the points of the recognition. You just want to be fair. Like you don't want to be like, oh my god, I rated my friends 1,000%, and oh my gosh, I can't believe they won. And I was on the judging panel with another person whose friends group was also in the masquerade. And again, we had talked about it. We're like, yeah, we're not voting for our own friends. That's makes no sense. They were both competing in the same level as well. They were both in Masters Division. And it was a really, really good masquerade. I mean, like, really good. And at the end of it, unfortunately, it came down to our two friends groups as far as craftsmanship and performance went. And we're looking at each other. We're like, I'm sorry, like, you guys are going to have to figure this out, because we're not going to say, oh yeah, my friends, or oh yeah, my friends. Or we'd be those people that'd be like, your friends, and you'd be like, your friends. And then your same predicament, like, who's going to win? So in that situation, they had to pull the costuming notes to see like where the nitpicking laid. And it came down to, I want to say it came really stupid shit. It had to come down to really stupid shit. But my friends won. Probably because of their costume design just being a little bit neater, I think, than the other group, if I recall. So my friends won best in show. And, life moves on. You don't think about it. And then the following year, I ended up not going to Anime Boston. I think it was a financial situation, if I recall. I was just like, yeah, I don't have the money for it this year. Like, I'm good. So the following year, your friends get a hold of you again. They're in charge of the events. They're like, hey, do you want to be a judge again? I was like, yeah, sure. That means I don't have to pay for a ticket in. I'm in. Cool. Stayed with some friends. And about a week before I went to the convention, I found out that there was a rumor floating around that I had been barred from Anime Boston. I was like, what? Why am I not allowed at Anime Boston? Like, I end up having to get a hold of people and being like, hi, I just want to make sure, am I actually banned from the convention? Like in my mind of minds, I'm like, what did I do? I'm like, I didn't even go last year. And that following year was the year of Uncle Yo. I don't know if anybody on here listens went to Anime Boston, but that year that I didn't go was the year that Uncle Yo, it wasn't pretty. punched a dude in the face, or a girl in the face, actually. Yeah, punched a girl in the face. It is a long story. Someday maybe I'll have somebody on here that can explain that whole story. But anyways, I was like, well, I didn't punch anybody in the face, so it wasn't me. Come to find out, somebody who was jealous for other reasons unrelated, um, decided that they were going to spread some nasty rumor on the internet on 4chan and say that I was banned from the convention because I voted for my friends to win Masquerade. Like the Masquerade was rigged because of me. The most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life, because it's like, okay, yeah, you know what, my friends did a good job, but at the end of the day, their skit to the other person's skit, if I didn't know them from a hole in the ground, I would have rated them very well, but I probably would have rated the other group a little bit higher. Like, and I'm saying that honestly with love, because they know I love their skit. But at the end of the day, if I had to choose and I didn't know them from anywhere, I probably would have been like, okay, this group gets a couple more points. So it's like, are you kidding me? So then I go to AMA Boston and I'm like asking people the whole time I'm there. I'm like, am I not supposed to be here? They're like, no, no, no. Some person started rumors and oh my God, it was such a huge mess. But like stuff like that happens. Like people in their mind of minds think that, you know, just because you're friends with somebody that's part of this big like masquerade thing, that you're obviously going to vote for them and they're obviously going to win. It's like, no, that's not how we roll. I mean, that's not how I roll. I know the people that were there, that's not how they rolled. So I mean, that whole convention, that was legit. Like that's those people that won, they won. Period. But it's like, oh my God, I can't believe you got that much time on your hands that you anyways. So, but like, again, things you deal with judges, people approaching you, questioning like what you've done. I don't mind people coming up to question me. Like at the end of the day, a lot of Sundays, you might have some groups come in to like cosplay events or whatever, and they'd be like, "Hey, can I have my judges' notes? You know, I just want to see so that they can improve themselves." Or if one of the judges are around, like I have no problem telling somebody like what worked and what didn't work in their skit, because I want them to do better at the end of the day. Like, you know, hey, your audio was a little bit or you know, you had a dance skit but it was kind of, you know, it looked like you had just copied dance moves from, you know, one of the many haru haru dances that are out there. Like it wasn't very original. Or you know, people ask about their costume stuff and I don't like, you know, like I said, some people come in and they make their costumes from scratch, like resin everything. Some people, and these are some of my favorite people because that was my life back in the day, go to Savers and they somehow take like a Savers t-shirt and turn it into this like ridiculously good costume. And I love that. I love it. I mean, I have so many snaps and props for those people. Like, I used to do it all the time until, you know, I started earning money and being an adult on my own. And I decided that, you know, buying fabric was nice and doing stuff from scratch. There's regrets. I have regrets that I've like fallen into that life because, you know, the Savers life and the Goodwill life was a much better life. Much cheaper, much easier. You still made stuff look good. But, you know, you want to tell those people, like, hey, maybe next time, like, you could buy some RIT dye, or you could do this, or, you know, practice your seams, or you know, just like little things. Like you don't want to make them be like, "Oh, well, your costume was crap," because like that's not true. Except for this, you know, my next story. But again, we'll get to that. But you know, you don't want to be rude to people because you don't want to discourage people. These like masquerades are supposed to kind of like uplift a little bit, just make you feel good about what you do. And I mean, I love all those kids. Like anybody that competes, like you get all the props in the world. Like anybody that even cosplays, like props to you. Like you put the costume on, you friggin' own it. Like judging is so hard. I think I've said that like 50 times already in the last like 15 minutes, but it really is. Like cuz you know, at the end of the day you're going to have people that are sad and upset and it breaks my heart. Cuz you don't want like everybody to go home with an award like, "Oh, participation award," cuz you don't want like to make the people that won, you know, feel less, I guess. I don't know, rambling a little bit. I just, you know, I want everybody to win, but at the same time I know everybody can't win and you just got to, you know, you got to be careful about how you judge. So like you feel like you actually given it to somebody that's earned it. That being said, people that think they earn it and they get in your faces about it are my absolute favorite people. My favorite in particular, which actually made me think of doing this podcast. So let's say at least 9 years ago. So maybe 2012 Kineticon, I want to say. Uh, Judging costume with my friends. And we had pretty much the same group of friends doing costume judging at Kineticon every single year that I was there, which was nice because you weren't going to be shocked if you came in and be like, oh, it's like a whole new group of people. It was the same group of people. We all worked really well together. We all had our strong points. And I just remember this guy comes in. Now, again, I appreciate the goodwill and the Sabers cosplay. I think it's awesome that people can just find something and make it into this character. This guy. First of all, he walks into the judging room and he's like, "Don't you know me?" And I'm looking at him and I'm like, "No, I don't think I know you. No, no." And again, you see a million people at these conventions, but like this guy really wanted to make sure that I knew him, which you don't want to do at judging because, again, like I said before, if I know you, I will not judge you. Like, you're losing out on points. So, I mean, like, I might recognize you from somewhere. Like, we might be, like, kinda-ish friends. If we're kinda-ish friends, cool. If we hang out on a regular basis, I'm not judging you. Like, period. So, I'm like, no, sorry. Like, no. No. I'm an honest person, too, unfortunately. Like, so it comes off as a little bit rude sometimes, my honesty. But that's unfortunately how I roll. I can't stop being that person. I can't. Anyways, so he comes in and I'm like, nah, I don't know you. So then he's dressed like Zack from Final Fantasy VII. And he's bought like the generic pants. He's done nothing to alter them. So it's like, okay, so you literally just went and bought pants. You didn't add any like inflection or anything to them. Cool. He bought like a cabled sweater and he'd cut the sleeves off of it, but he hadn't fixed like the hem around the arms on it. So it was very sloppily done. It was kind of like he woke up that morning, went down the street to like Walmart, bought his outfit, and fixed it in the hotel room. Not well. So it's like, okay. And the wig was okay. Like, no, it wasn't even a wig. Now that I'm like slowly slowly remembering. I think he just like had his hair black and he'd like kind of tried to style it himself, but it wasn't the style. And I have nothing against people using their own hair. I use my own hair as much as humanly possible, but I do take my time to style it to the character that I am doing. And it just wasn't it. Like, he came in, it kind of like he rolled out of bed and was like, "Judge me." And he had a really cool sword for Zack, but he plopped onto the table. But my friend, who was I thought it looked cool, but my friend, who was the props person, they're just kind of like, no, look, it's got like a bunch of like, it's not it. And then proceeds to tell us about all the things that he'd wanted to do on the costume that he didn't do. I mean, obviously he didn't do shit. It was like he again showed up in his everyday wear to be judged. But it was like, you're like listening to the guy, like, oh, well, I wanted to do magnets in the back so the sword would clip in, but I didn't have time, and I wanted to do this, but I didn't have time. And you just kind of, at that point, you're wondering why these people come to judging. You're like, well, I mean, like, you could have just been like, hey, I'm going to drop out. Like, my costume's just not finished. There's no shame in that. Stuff happens. Another story I will get to in a minute. But, so he leaves, and we're like, okay, well, we all kind of look at each other, and we just decide, we're like, yeah, no, that's not going to happen. Come to Masquerade that evening. And I host Masquerade at Kineticon. I do the craftsmanship judging at Kineticon, or I did do it. And then I would host their masquerade at night, and I'm announcing the walk-ons. And I announced this guy because I remember his name, which I will not disclose, obviously. And on stage, he walks on in an Aaron costume from Final Fantasy X. Now, okay, now mind you, this also looked like he just went out and bought like a Chinese silk robe and threw it over the costume he was wearing previously, slicked his hair back, and put on a pair of sunglasses with the same sword. But he walks off stage. And I'm just kind of like, next we have, like, it was, Why would you show up in the costume you showed up in and then go to masquerade as a completely different character? Like, if you were competing like as a completely different performance as opposed to like craftsmanship, because at ConnectiCon, craftsmanship and performance judging were two completely different things. There was never a best in show. You could do that. You could show up and like, do the costume judging for this and then do the performance as something else. Sure. But he was only doing craftsmanship and he showed up in a completely different costume, which apparently he thought was done. And that was not the case. So, needless to say, he did not win an award that year. There was a lot of people that put a lot more effort in than he did, and it was just very confusing. And I bet you think that's the end of the story, but of course it's not. Of course it's not, dear listener. So, end of the story goes, the next morning, we're all half awake, we're dead, we're tired, like, we're packing up the room for the weekend because, we gotta load it back into a truck and be done because it's Sunday. And we've got people coming in and they're picking up their binders and thanking us and saying what a fun convention it was. And I remember I was sitting at one of the tables that had all the binders on it for pickup, and in he walks in the same costume. And he's like, I need to speak to the judges from yesterday. And the girl was in charge who was there was like, is there something we can help you with? Because she was also one of the judges. And he proceeds to go on about how, like, the group that won best overall costumes had cheated and they never made their costumes and he knows them and that they are liars and, like, just dragging them through the mud. And they were one of the people that gave us one of the biggest binders that showed, like, every single intricate detail of what they did, which, by the way, if you go to do judging, I very much recommend that you bring something like that to show judges. Maybe not like every single detail, but like give them an idea of what the process was, because it does help them out too. But anyway, so he's like going on and on and on and on. And finally, I think part of it was I was exhausted, and part of it was I just didn't want to listen to this dude anymore because he was being such a fucknut. So I was like, who are you? And he says his name, and I was just like, hi, yeah, I was one of the judges from yesterday for craftsmanship. Aren't you the same guy that showed up in this outfit yesterday that looks like you threw it together in 2 seconds? Aren't you the guy that came in yesterday and didn't have any reference pictures whatsoever to show whatever process this was? Aren't you the guy yesterday that came in here and told us all the things that you wanted to do, but you didn't actually do on your costume? And aren't you the guy that was on stage last night in a completely different costume that was also a level of not complete? And he's just staring at me. And everybody in the room's just like, oh no, there she goes. Because it's like, you're not going to come in here thinking you're God's gift to cosplay, looking like the way you are, acting like the way you are, and thinking you're going to drag people that earned what they won. Oh, he shut up real quick. And he was just like, oh, well, yeah, And I'm like, yeah, I'll tell you exactly why you didn't get anything. And pretty much just unloaded everything that we went through judging the day before. And he walked away with his tail between his legs. And I also pretty much like threw the entire binder that he said didn't exist at him for the girls that had won. So I never saw him compete again. I probably shamed him into never wanting to embarrass himself like that again. And again, I don't want to be that person. It sounds like terrible, but at the end of the day, it's like, you don't need to be a terrible person. Like, we're all in the same community. We're all trying to be nice to each other. Like, do not try to bring people down or I will wreck you. Like, we're not here for negativity and we're not here for, making people feel like shit because you didn't win something. Not today, Satan. That's not how the world works. No. That being said, I have been through several judgings of my own, the one being for Dead Moon Circus, which, got a little... You barely got any clothing on because of the characters that you are, so that judging gets a little bit squirrely. But another episode for another day. A few years later, in Boston, when I wasn't judging also, I got asked to be part of a huge Final Fantasy group. And my God, the costumes for it were unreal. Like, I feel like we pulled every single one of our friends. It's all one master's division. And we're like, hey, you want to make a really complicated ass costume? And they're like, yeah. And everybody turned out. Like, we had every single Aeon, every single one. Everyone I picked one. I made the sisters, um, the bug sisters. My friends had made, you're gonna have to forgive me because Final Fantasy X is not my forte. I know a couple of the characters, but I'm like, literally everybody. They made me the bird. My friend Rob made this Bahamut costume. Now, here's the thing. You're going through the convention. We've got this big skit planned. It's a really good skit. These really big costumes. Getting through the halls of any convention is rough, but getting through the halls of Anime Boston sometimes is disastrous. And if you're working on a costume and you're trying to get the last pieces together, you're gonna miss your judging time because like getting through and big costume, and it was a very stressful day for all of us because things were breaking on costumes because they're just so big. And I just remember we got to our judging, we apologized for being late. um they had to judge us in the room next door, which was the photo room, because that's how big Rob's costume was. All of our costumes were. And they came next door to finally judge us. And there's like 10 people in our group. Because, like I said, we had every single Aeon. And I remember, like, they kind of looked at a few of the costumes. The rest of us, they kind of breezed over. Like, it wasn't like they were really paying attention at all. Um, and all they were concerned about with Rob's costume, this Bahamut costume, which, I mean, the wings opened up on it. I'm pretty sure it lit up in some places. They were more concerned about the fact that if the mouth moved on it. Like, really? It's like, I'm sorry, do you not see the guy? Like, he made a friggin' Bahamut costume. And again, if I didn't know him and I saw that in the hallway, I probably would like up shit myself because it was so cool looking. And like after that, like I said, everybody else put like their heart and soul into these costumes, and they didn't really care. So then, they leave, they go back to doing their judging life, and we're trying to get set up for like taking pictures so that they have a picture to show at Masquerade. Um and the costume like was falling apart, and we knew Rob was exhausted, and like it's a big costume to wear, and it's just frustrating because you put so much time into something. And we all kind of ultimately just made the decision that we needed to drop out, because if it was this bad now, getting on stage later was going to be a disaster. And so one of us went over and told the girls, like, hi, just so you know, our group's dropping out. And the second we told them we were dropping out, it was like, but why? Like, suddenly they cared. It's like, hi, we feel like you didn't give a crap about any of this. And honestly, like, we're having a rough day and it's just not going to work out. Like, costumes aren't going to work out, but thanks anyways. And I mean, we ended up like, we had dinner instead of like sitting through like a 2.5 hour masquerade, because oh my gosh, just thinking about sitting in those costumes for that long, oh, it would have been, lesson learned on our part. But that was like us being judged. And it's like I said, like, you're gonna have experiences like that where it's like you feel like you've put a lot into a costume, and you're just gonna feel like judges don't care. And I don't like that. I don't like when, like, I like to uplift people. They come in, it's like, hey, look at you. You look awesome. Like, look at your costume. Like, regardless, you want to make sure people feel like good about their judging, not make them feel like shit. So just some helpful tips. Don't let yourself be felt like crap. Always feel free to ask questions at a convention, the next day. Be polite about it. Niceness goes a long way. You don't have to come in raging like somebody else we talked about, because that's not going to get you very far. And yeah, I want you guys to feel good about going to conventions and when they open up again. And going to be judged. We're not scary people. I promise. We're all this, we all part of the same community. We all started where you guys started. And I mean, everyone's just there to really have a good time. Yeah, a trophy and a medal, like, those are awesome to come home with. But honestly, it's really about the experience. And if you haven't had the experience of sitting backstage with a bunch of nervous people, watching a bunch of skits, and just trying to like uplift each other and cheering for each other when you get off stage. Like, I highly recommend it. It is one of the best feelings in the world. So there's that. You know what, guys? Thanks for tuning in this week. Trying to think about what I want to promote, because I have everybody promote something every week. You know what? Go get vaccinated. Go get vaccinated so we can all see each other again. We can all go to conventions. I know New Hampshire in particular has opened up to anybody and everybody. So if you haven't gotten your vaccine yet, check the New Hampshire website and get yourself vaccinated so that we can all see each other at Anime Boston next year, or Connecticut, or New York Comic Con, or who cares? I just want to, like, I'll have a convention in my backyard at this point. I just miss seeing people and being in costume. Thanks so much for tuning in, guys. Glad you're enjoying the show. Thanks so much for all the views, and we will see you next week. Bye.